If you've pointed Claude Cowork in a project folder, you've probably had this happen. You connect it to the job, you ask it something simple like what are our liquidated damages rate, and it either takes forever or gives you an irrelevant answer, or just chews through half your usage getting there. So in this video, I'm going to show you the setup, not just the features within. This is how to actually structure Cowork for a construction project, how to organize it around your business and your individual jobs, then how to index a folder once so Claude knows where everything lives, instead of essentially reading everything to try and understand the one thing that you asked about, and then how to do all of that without burning a week's worth of usage in an afternoon. That way you can ask a question about a job and get an answer in just a few seconds off the correct document, and it sets you up to be able to do some more complex tasks coming up. So before we get into that, Cowork needs a paid plan. So it needs either the Pro, Max, or Team, or Enterprise. And it used to be desktop only. That's changed now. You can now get it on the web and on your phone. And so you can run it in the cloud. But for what we're going to be using, it's going to be the desktop app, because the desktop app is where Cowork can connect to the files that are actually on your computer. And that's where generally our documents live. And it just makes it easier to interface with it. So to do that is very easy. You just go to claude.com/download. You'll see that this one's prompting the Mac for me because that's what I'm on, but also we have the Windows options available down here as well. So that is step one. It'll then bring you through to the desktop app which looks like this, where you can sign in and essentially gives you access to your workspace. And this is where we'll be going forward when we want to use Claude Cowork. So you can see at the top, it's split between chat, Cowork, and code. Now, Cowork is essentially a easier to use, easier to get started with version of code is the best way to do it. Yes, it has less capabilities, but it is a good step up from chat in terms of what we can do with it, especially in the construction industry when we're often dealing with very large file sizes and a large amount of context is often needed for a vast number of tasks. So essentially, where does Cowork differ from chat? So the best way to think about chat is it's probably what you're most used to. And essentially, it's great for doing those smaller tasks, for research-based tasks, particularly online. And it is good for quick questions. So it will use less tokens than Cowork naturally, no matter how you have it set up. And projects do exist within there as well. It's important to know that projects in chat are different from projects in Cowork. Particularly if you're on a Teams plan, projects in chat can be shared with a wider team, with your team, and they can work within there. Cowork projects are local only to you. And the way you can use projects essentially is for bite-sized chunks of information that may not necessarily change that much or get updated that much. So static documents and the likes, and much more quicker tasks where you're not necessarily wanting to edit or create documents or a large amount of context is not necessary. That's where chat is useful. Now, when we're looking at doing real work, this is where Cowork comes in. And the best way to think about Cowork is it's a AI agent as such that operates within a folder that you give it access to. That's fundamentally what Cowork is. Now, what's important to know about that is Cowork can only run on files or folders that are written directly to your laptop. So to your desktop, they need to be actually on your disk. I will go into some ways that you can use it on folders that are maybe in a Google Drive or a SharePoint later, and some of the risks around that. But for now, it's important to know that in order to use Cowork, that folder needs to be on your desktop so that Cowork can read it. Otherwise, it will connect to it, but it won't be able to see any of the files in there. So with that said, let's look at how we first start with Cowork. So when we're looking at a construction business, there's generally you have your overarching business folder, which will have a certain structure. Let's say, for example, you have admin, business development, health and safety, quality, your fleet, something along those lines, and then projects. So we want to start thinking about Cowork in terms of different projects. And what that means is what we'll want to get set up is an overarching project folder in Cowork that has everything about the business, where we can ask questions that are more broad, like, for example, when is my insurance expiring, or give me a summary of where all projects are at currently. That's sort of the business level that we want to be using Cowork for. But the vast majority of the true work we'll be doing will be per project. So let's say, for example, we go into the project, and in this case, there's 3 projects, active projects within here. Now we click into each and we have our general project structure. This will be another Cowork project where we come to do purely our project work. So a lot of the workflows that are inside of Contractor OS, we will run within a project like this. So what does that look like? For example, so realistically, when we're inside of Claude Cowork, when we run new task, we always have to select a project folder to run within it. And that's essentially the space that it has access to pull context from. But what it will mean is we just end up with a bunch of essentially chat windows that we've gone through down here, not making much sense. So we always want to be running out of a project. So now we come down to projects here, and the way we can start a new project easiest is to go simply new project, and you can start from scratch and set things up. And that way, start a new folder. If you're doing that, then it will have nothing essentially. But the easiest way to get started is to use an existing folder. So I'm going to connect to the folder we were just looking at. So I'm going to go into here. It's inside of my Cowork drive. And my civil company. So I'm going to select that and get it open. At this stage, I don't need to give it any specific instructions. I just want it to have access to everything. And I'm going to go create. Now I want to run all of the tasks that I'm doing around this particular part of this business as such within inside of this project. And you can see here that I'm operating within the project space. Simply got instructions you can add, scheduled, and the context, so you can see exactly what it has access to, which is the entire folder structure. So that's step 1 in terms of getting the Cowork set up. Now, this is great for when we want to do overarching company tasks as such, or work, you may call it. But the second and most useful way to use Cowork is essentially to start thinking the actual physical projects that you're running inside your company. So you have a place to go for that. So to do that, essentially we want a narrowed down version of what we're looking at here, because this currently is going to be looking at the entire business and all projects. So what we want to do for that is go back to projects and essentially create a project for each one of our actual real construction projects. Same process. So we're going to go use an existing folder, select a folder, except this time we're going to go down to the same space that I was in before, but we're going to go into projects, and then we're going to select this one project to have as this folder. And now I'm going to go create, and this will be the place that I go when I'm doing work specific for this project. That is the 80-20 of how to get Cowork essentially set up and where you work for individual things. So now when I'm coming to do a task in Cowork, it's either going to be a task that is purely related to a specific project, in which case I will go to that project and start the task there. Or if it's more business related, something more broad, where I want the rest of my company context, I'm going to go into my projects, and then I'm going to go through to the civil company, the overarching company space. That is more the broad overview of exactly where things live and where they don't live. Now, the big question that most people have at this point is, well, all of my documents live in SharePoint or Google Drive. Now, that is not a problem, except when we're first starting with Cowork, we want to get used to how it works. So my number one recommendation is to create a duplicate of the folder you want to work in from within inside SharePoint or Google Drive and save it to your desktop. And then this essentially means that you're not going to disrupt the data that you or your team are going to be using in SharePoint, but you have a copy of it on your own drive here. And so What that means is that whenever we do a piece of work that we actually want to share with the wider team or as part of a deliverable with the project, something that we would have created anyway, we will then go through and copy or upload that specific Excel sheet, Word document, whatever it might be, up to our SharePoint, and then we have full control of what is going to our SharePoint. That's sort of phase one as we're getting used to this. Now, once we're comfortable working with inside of that, the best way to share folders is through a tool called GitHub, which I will share in a later module of this course. But for now, I'm going to show you how you can connect your Google Drive or OneDrive to Cowork. But the important caveat to this is that it will give Copilot access to your live files as such on your Google Drive, and it has the ability to edit, change, and essentially delete those as well. Granted, you can do the ask before acting so that you can essentially approve everything it does, but reviewing when you're getting a lot of asks is hard, and it is easy to accept a change that you may not necessarily have wanted to, and that will update in the documents that your rest of your team can see and what you're going to use going forward. So it's important to know that is the case. But if you did want to go away and do that, so you can see I have my Google Drive and my OneDrive on my, I guess I can access them from my laptop. So if I go into my Google Drive, you can see here's my shared drive. Here's my entire business that's inside of Google. Now I can connect Cowork to this. Right now it is actually downloaded, but say it wasn't, which is probably the position most of you are in, Cowork would connect to it, but it wouldn't be able to see any of the files because they're stored in the cloud. So what you do is you right click and there's a make available offline function, and it's similar for SharePoint as well. That will ensure that all of the files within here are written locally and stored locally on my laptop, and that essentially means that Cowork can access them, view them, and use them, do work within them. But what it will mean is that when it makes a change or creates documents, they will also be put into this shared folder. So when that drive or folder syncs, it will be available to the rest of your team. It'll also be available in the cloud. That is important. Those changes will happen. Often when you first start using Cowork as well, you'll find that the AI will naturally want to create a lot more documents than you actually need or want to use, and it can become cluttered. As you use Cowork more, you define your workflows better and your instructions better, so that does not happen, which means you can keep a tidier folder structure. But initially, that is likely what's going to be the case. So a few things to watch out for. So now let's go back to my Cowork section and the folder that we're running out of for the moment. Okay, so that's it. We have Cowork set up. We have a project set up. Now, the next thing is, as it currently stands, whenever we ask Cowork, so within inside of our civil company here, a question, what it's going to do is try and understand everything in this folder and what might be relevant, which is hard to do at the moment. I mean, if you're looking at this, like, what does administration mean? I've got to go through, and now you can see there's a bunch of Word documents and Excel sheets that it's got to look at to try and understand the question that we're after. It's got to look through every single folder to really understand what's available. It's going to go through the projects and, okay, what projects are we running? And again, all of these are running inside of Word documents and Excel, which is not efficient for Claude to be able to read. So the first thing we're going to want to do, and this is a nice structure, and to be honest, structure matters. It makes it easier for AI to follow. But what's more important, if your folders are really unstructured, even just having an AI context folder to essentially point it in the right direction through the most efficient files is the way to do it. So the next step, now that we kind of understand the basics of Cowork, is what are we actually, how can we make this efficient so that we can use Cowork more often while not blowing the context window of our model and using up far too many tokens to do one simple task within here. So to do that inside of Contractor OS, you have access to what's called our project indexer skill. So if we come into the classroom, we come through the workflows, you can see it's in here and some instructions on how to download it and set it up. Very simple, download, upload. Also at the same time, we have our drawing analyzer skill. These work in tandem, so make sure you have both of them set up together. Now I'm going to show you exactly what the project indexer skill is. So I'm going back to my projects we just set up. I'm going to start with the overarching company profile, essentially. And what I want to do now is I'm going to go, the first thing before I do any tasks inside of Cowork is go / project indexer. I have two because this one is the one assigned to the contractor OS skills plugin. I'll go more on that later, but for now I'm going to run the regular project indexer skill. To be honest, they're both the same. It doesn't matter, and hit enter on that. So that is the first thing I do when I create a new project. I connect a new folder to Cowork, and what that does is front load essentially the Claude being able to understand what is inside of the folder we have given it. Now, obviously, the more stuff you have in a folder, the more tokens, the more usage it's going to go through to essentially understand that. But the output we'll get is a 0.ai context folder where, in a space where Claude will read that first. So it can quickly answer questions while also not burning a ton of tokens. So it will take a couple of seconds for this to run, and it will ask a question first up as well. Here we go, for exactly what we want to get out of this run with the project indexer. And once it's set up, I will go through exactly how we treat the project indexer going forward to essentially keep things up to date. So it's talking about which projects do I actually want to index. In this case, I want to go through all three because I want to look at the overarching company itself, and I'll show you exactly how to do it inside of a project one as well. So I'm going to click continue, and now it's going to go through and do the indexing process. So that's for the overarching business Cowork area. But what about when we want to do just the project specific work? What we actually want is to go back into our project section, come through to the project that we're working on at the moment, and do exactly the same thing. So let's go / project indexer again. And this is just going to index exactly the folder that it's in and not worry about the rest of it. So it's going to give essentially this project workspace its own indexing section. So when we do our project work within here, it is as efficient as possible essentially. So I'm going to hit enter on that. Similar to before, it will actually ask a couple of questions about exactly what we want to go through the project indexer. We'll answer those, it'll go away and do that. Now you can see, even though we're operating within the project, the two, quick access areas, or where these chats are stored, is still on the side in the recents. But more importantly is when we want to review, say we're doing something useful in the future, we can come back to our projects and we can go back in and see where we're at essentially in terms of the workspace itself. So that's Cowork. I'll explain exactly what the project indexer has done by showing you inside of the folder in just a second once we get there. Okay, so now we can see that the project, the Papamoa East Stage 7 subdivision, has completed the project indexer and it answered similar questions. It was just highlighting the files that it's found, and in this particular project there isn't any drawings in there, and so it's just confirming that, and then it's asked what my role is in terms of that project, and I've put head contractor, could be project manager, could be estimator, whatever it might be. It's asked that there, and your Claude will know you better, so it will better understand exactly what your role is. Now the output of the project indexer skill is essentially the 0.ai context folder. In this case, it's created two documents that are for basically having it understand the project, the claude.md and the project.md. And what they are is, you can now see inside of our folder, we have the 0.ai context folder. This is important because this claude.md file is what Claude is going to read every single time we ask a question inside that Cowork project. And what it is it's a markdown file, which is very simply just a text file that Claude can read to understand exactly what's going on within that project. And we can see here there's a paragraph on what the project actually is. Then most importantly, there's a folder structure. So what's inside of each of the folders and a little snippet of what's there. So should your question say be about the contract, Claude can very easily know where to go to find out that information. And you can see it has that for every single one, and then where to find what. So the questions to go to, like we just said, for example, contract terms. These are common questions you may ask, or common pieces of context Claude may need to do a task, and now it knows where to go to find that. Some key project facts, key personnel as well, and then open items. You can see it's pulled and some RFIs that are open and all of that, as well as some final notes on when the index was generated, how many files there were, and so on. So that is the first one. The second one is this project.md as well. So markdown files are just the most efficient way for Claude to be able to understand things. So if, say for a PDF, which we would think is a relatively simple document, for Claude to read that, it'd be like us trying to read a sentence, I guess, with random words kind of put in between and us making sense of that. It's just harder. Whereas a markdown file, Claude can read very simply. It's in its own language, and it's the most efficient way for us to be able to give LLMs in general information because they work on text base. And you can see here, this is a more detailed look at what exactly the project's at, some key dates, some important information, the scope of works, just in general, good context Claude can pull on when it's doing tasks for us in the future without going and needing to, say, read the big Excel spreadsheet or read the Word document or the PDF or whatever it may be. And also, this project didn't have drawings, so I'll show you one that did. What the project indexer does with drawings, so let's go into this one, same AI context folder, is it splits the drawings out into individual sheets as such, and JSON around that. So not particularly important, we don't really need to go there. That's just a better way for it to be able to review the drawings more accurately. But what it does with each of them is, if we go into this drawings folder, we get a markdown of every single drawing sheet that we have. So exactly the same thing. And that is looks ugly to us, but it is fantastic for Claude to read. And it has very detailed description of exactly what's inside of that drawing. And it has one of those for every single sheet. Why that is good is because there's a lot of context that lives in drawings for construction. And this means that when we need to reference them going forward, Claude will go here rather than trying to go and look at the PDF again, particularly if that PDF is the entire one. It's going to have to go through and look at the entire PDF and use its visualize to actually understand it and then give us an answer. Whereas in reality, we want to front load that, which is what we've done. So now we have that context in a markdown file, and it splits out the sheets into the PDF into individual sheets, so that if Claude did need to go and have a double check, a deeper look at a drawing for whatever reason we may have asked it, it can go to that individual sheet and look more detailed at that, because that's the bit that's relevant. That is super important in terms of managing your context and managing your token usage when it comes to using Cowork. Now, along the similar lines of how we have our Claude.md that has the structure of our folder, we have the same thing for our drawings. So now we have 3 markdown files here. And this one is going to look just as ugly as the rest of them. But what this is it's indexing all of the drawings that we have. And in a similar way to how Cowork now knows where to go when we want a specific question, say on the contract, if we have one on the drawings or a specific part of the drawings or something we need to pull from it, It knows what drawing contains an information up front, so it can look at this markdown first, and then it can go through and look at that specific drawing markdown to see if the answer's there. If not, it can then go and look more deeply at that specific PDF. And what that is called is progressive disclosure. And what it means is that we can ask one place, our one Cowork hub, very specific questions, and what it can then do is progressively reveal the context that's relevant based on our question and what we want to get out of it, rather than just getting overloaded with everything where the majority of it is not relevant. And that's how we can get really good answers out of Cowork. And that is essentially what we're doing when we're setting up these Cowork folders. So now to take a step back, and just for reference, for each one of our projects we have in Cowork, at the moment there's 2. You will have one for each one of your projects you're going to be doing work in Cowork on, and your company one. For each one of those, we have ensured that there is an AI context folder. So this is the overarching business one. Very, very similar in terms of the Claude.md it will read every single time, which instead of explaining the project folder now, explains the overarching folder structure we have for the business, what's involved, and some context on the company as well as this company.md. And we can take a look. This is context on the company. Now, to level up your projects, it actually can be a great idea to duplicate this company .md file and actually put that within your project folders. So what I would then do is take this company markdown, because this is great context on what you do, your people, and other parts of the business, providing that this is okay to share with the team that may have access to that folder. Is we can then go back to here and we will go through, and inside of our AI context we could paste in that markdown file. So again, it has good context to pull from a simple document that is the markdown folder. That is really important. And then inside this AI context, it really has everything it needs to answer a lot of the questions or use in tasks that we have going forward. So now we have this set up, we're essentially ready to go forward and start using this project as our workspace for when we want to complete tasks relevant to this project, and it will efficiently be able to pull the information we need. Now, a couple of tips on the using the project indexer or drawing analyzer skill. Yes, it front loads the token usage a lot and sets us up for future work. So it will use obviously more tokens than you would be used to. So some good tips for that is that Claude runs essentially its usage in 5-hour blocks and weekly blocks. And so a good idea is to either run this when you don't want to use Claude for a long period of time. I mean, there's a good chance it's not going to use up all your usage, but just depending on how many drawings we have inside of the folder and how much information is within inside the folder as well will depend how much usage it has. So either use it when you're not going to use Claude for a while, or at the end of the day so your usage resets by the morning. And a good strategy to check in on your usage is you can go down here, go to settings, and then go through to usage, and it will give you your current session and how long it left till it reset and how much you've used of that session, as well as your weekly usage. And then there's some only usage. It's just a great way to essentially check in and see where you're at and know when you may need to either throttle back your usage, or if you've only got an hour left and you have 100% left, then go ahead and run a project indexer. So you can essentially smartly manage your token usage as well. So that's a good little tip. So now we have our folder set, we're good to go. What can we do inside of Cowork? Well, we can run essentially any skill that we've downloaded and uploaded that we've created. We can run them inside of Cowork just as we would as a chat, knowing that we have the context and everything that goes with what's within this folder. So We can call specific documents if we need to by just referencing the file path or just their name, and Claude will go and view those and essentially go through and create work. We can tell it to work within a specific, say, Excel spreadsheet, and really do anything we like there. So for example, I can then go and do something like, let's say, the procurement packaging skill. I'll create a procurement register, and I would run those, and it should naturally pick up where they are, but to be hyper specific, you might just go and point it into the exact, so you might, whatever trade you're wanting to do the procurement packaging for, you would point it in that direction where it's going to go, or just run it and it will go through all of them. So things like that. And the next natural question is, well, what if I have data sort of outside of my Cowork folder? How can I get access to that? Now, much the same way we can call connectors in chat, we can do the same in Cowork. So for example, if you have your cost data library in a tool like Airtable, then we can still make those outside connections. Now, to do that, if you haven't already, is to go to Customize Connectors and look through your list of connectors, and this is what Claude can access essentially from within inside Cowork as well. So let's say you have your cost data in Airtable. You can see everything Claude can do is inside the connectors here. So there's a lot that it can do, and you can manage those permissions here as well. And to use that inside of Cowork, it's very simple. We just call out what we want. So if you want to pull pull a number from your cost data library, you would simply say in this Cowork folder here to go to the Airtable and look up your cost data library for X, whatever you want to ask. And Claude can go and make that connection. Where this is important is for things like the estimating workflow. If you're doing the line by line skill within inside of that, which needs your cost data library to be able to pull those from, it will just be baked into the skill that it knows to go and check Airtable to pull out the relevant line by line items that we need to do that. And that's completely doable inside of Cowork. So connectors are important when we're looking at using them within inside of Cowork. If the piece of context, the information we need, is not already inside our folder here. Because what a lot of companies have to start with is their cost database inside of an Excel sheet, which is inside the project already, in which case it can reference that because it has access to it as part of our Cowork project. So that is that. So just quickly, all the skills that I've gone through here, as well as over 100 others, are inside our community, Contractor OS, where you can jump in here, you can download them all in one go, or you can go through and grab the ones that are specific to you and just go in here, jump down, see the download button, and we keep them up to date, and we're adding new ones over time. So that's the place to be. We also have 15-minute calls where we can help point you in the right direction. And our entire goal is to help you get genuinely useful results with AI. So I'd love to see you in there. The link for it is just down in the description. Now, the next thing is our Contractor OS plugin that we have available for download. To start with, the best thing really is to download this plugin because it gives you all the skills up front, and to get used to working within projects within Cowork, because they also have memory baked in, and they also will store your chats down here as well, so you can access them going forward. But the big thing here is that the inherent memory that comes from these projects is, yes, things that you'll have talked about in your chat window will get stored as memory that builds up over time. But also we want to make sure that whenever we've updated something meaningfully, or we've had a big week on that project, we run the project indexer skill, say at the end of the week, the start of the following week, and that will keep those claude.md files, the project.md files, up to date. So when you do come to do a chat here, Claude will just know what point you're at in the project, or what point a certain RFI is at, or whatever it might be. It maintains that memories going forward. So you essentially it can keep being as most useful to you as possible. And that's the great thing about having it working within live documents, is that context is constantly updated. Whereas if we're inside of a chat project, that document is static. And so when updates happen, they won't be reflected within inside that project, which is where Cowork really excels, is the fact that we can keep up to date with the AI can keep up to date with where we're actually at. So another important point on that as well is that when we go new task, it's going to bring us back to the space and we select a new folder. Whenever we're doing a new task, we want to be thinking in projects now, and we can go through and hit projects and then select the specific project we want and start our chat here. This will keep them organized inside of our project, ensure our memory starts building up over time as we continue using them, and keeps everything organized. Now, Cowork also has a feature called scheduled tasks, and you can see here you can add those in. Essentially, that's going to be a prompt that runs at a set period of time. So say you might want a daily update of what happened in the project for the previous day or any updates from there, and that will run at a set time for you. Now, you may choose to run that at midnight when you're not actually using Claude. It will use your usage at midnight then to generate that. So when you get to work, you'll have that output ready and waiting for you. The challenge with scheduled tasks is that in order to be able to use them, your laptop has to be open and on, essentially not running. So for example, my laptop doesn't shut off overnight, it can continue running. So any scheduled tasks I have will run anyway, although I run mine in Claude Code and routines, which I'll cover in a separate video, so that they can run when my laptop's not on. But that's just a small caveat, and that means that if your laptop's off, they will run when it's turned back on. But to set them up is very easy. To be honest, you obviously select the folder it's going to work within and the frequency that it goes through for that scheduled task, but have the prompt created by Claude inside of that whatever project you're working within and whatever task you want to do. Say you want to set up a scheduled task and what that task is, roll through that, and then Claude within inside of the Cowork window here will actually create the scheduled task itself, rather than going through and creating it inside of here, which is a little bit more manually. Yes, you can do it, but realistically, you can just create it inside of a chat window and describe exactly what you want, and Claude will take that up as well.